Greetings, ladies and gentlemen of the internet. Rock and Roll Spot coming at you after a lengthy hiatus, for which I apologize for. Let's kick off this new year about a month and a half late with a top 10 movies of this past year list. Anywho, starting from the bottom, moving to the top. Number 10, Star Trek Into Darkness. While I enjoyed this movie, there were still quite a few things that, as a Star Trek fan, I found wrong with it. However, for everything I found wrong, there were at least two things I found right. It may have been 2.5 hours of fan service, but you know what? It was still a good 2.5 hours of fan service. Next on the list, Despicable Me 2. As adorable and fun as the first one, and as before, the Minions completely steal the show. It was fun to note while watching the movie that Gru still has some of his villainous tendencies, or at least takes pleasure in some of the smaller sides of villainy. Moving on to number 8, This Is the End. To be perfectly honest, this movie would not have been anywhere near as good had it not had a cast of actors playing caricatures of themselves. It's raunchy as hell, filthy, but funny as hell as well. It's not the smartest movie, but hey, it'll make you laugh. Unless you're easily offended, in which case I do not recommend it. Also, after having watched this movie, I am never going to look at Channing Tatum the same way ever again. Oof. Moving on to number 7, Riddick. I've been a fan of the Riddick series since Pitch Black came out in 2000. And of course, after Chronicles of Riddick came out, I thought that, well, maybe the series had come to an end. Imagine my surprise when Riddick was announced for release this past summer. Great movie. I absolutely love seeing the franchise come back. Hopefully the story will continue, as the ending does leave it slightly open-ended. It was also quite nice to see a movie that was, in some ways very similar to Pitch Black, at the same time quite different. Anyhow, moving on to number 6, Gravity. I honestly did not think that this was going to be anywhere near as good as it turned out to be. I mean, a movie that's basically an hour and a half of Sandra Bullock floating around in space talking to herself? How good could that be? The answer is actually quite good. I have to give her credit. She's got some chops that I've never even thought she had. All that being said, it's completely worth watching in 3D for no other reason the zero-G debris that floats around throughout the various sequences. Moving on to number 5, The World's End. This movie was funny and poignant with themes and moments that really kind of, to a degree, hit home for me. That being said, I'm always happy to see the combined trio of Simon Pegg, Edgar Wright, and Nick Frost together. Hopefully, even though this is the end of the Cornetto trilogy, which began with Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz, we'll see them collaborate more in the future. Quite a great movie, and also great casting. But, hey, British actors. Right? Moving on to number 4, Her. It's a touching and slightly offbeat love story that actually, when you look at how technology is advancing, could be plausible in the near-ish future. That being said, Joaquin Phoenix was an excellent lead, and Scarlett Johansson was amazing as the voice of, well, her. Though it does not exactly have a twist ending, I will say it did not end even remotely how I expected it to. Moving on now to number 3. Hey, we're almost done there. Evil Dead. When I initially saw the trailers for this, I was not impressed. It looked to me as though someone had taken a really good horror script and just basically said, hey, how many buckets of gore can we pour on this thing? I went to see it because a friend invited me to go see it with her on opening night, and by God, I was impressed. Not only Yes, there was gore. There was a lot of it, but it all worked for the movie. Admittedly, for say normal for non-horror movies, there was a lot of gore, and even for horror movies, there's still a lot of gore. But hey, it's a horror movie. What does one expect? Especially seeing as how looking at the past Evil Dead movies and all the gore and whatnot that has been in those. Also, spoilers ahead if you haven't seen it. Hopefully, Bruce Campbell's brief cameo at the very end signals that both the original Evil Dead trilogy and this new Evil Dead, not so much remake as reboot, will eventually eventually cross over into one film. I know that would be quite fun to watch for me. And instead of moving on to number 2, we have a tie for number 1. First off, The Hobbit, The Desolation of Smaug. Of course this would be on here. I'm a sci-fi fantasy fan. How could it not be? Quite a few liberties were taken with the source material, but that always happens with an adaptation. You have to expect it. Hell, going into any adaptation, you have to ask yourself, what's going to be changed? And not every change was necessary. Legolas's presence was really just kind of, he felt shoehorned in, really. And Tariel's romantic subplot with one of the dwarves, no thank you. No thank you. No. That should not have been there. However, I will say this for the movie. Smaug himself was amazing looking, and Benedict Cumberbatch's voice was absolutely perfect for him. I eagerly anticipate the finale of this trilogy, based upon one book for the most part, at the end of the year. And finally, the other movie in the top spot, Pacific Rim. Now, to me, Pacific Rim was the perfect summer movie. The previews showed it to be about giant robots fighting giant monsters, and guess what? That's what the movie was about. Giant robots fighting giant monsters. There was no hidden political message. There was hints at romance that worked with the plot. Now, there was humor, don't get me wrong. There were some hilarious ones with Charlie Day and Ron Perlman, after all. The two of them should act together more often, and that's for damn sure. Normally, this is the kind of movie I would say, I really hope they make a sequel because this was so amazing, but with the way the movie ended, no, leave it alone. It's perfect as just one movie. Anyway, that being said, later on today I'll be going to see the Lego movie and possibly even making a video for you all telling you what I thought of it. All that being said, this is Rock and Roll Spock signing off. As always, live long, rock hard.